Why won't you date? The question left Evelyn Carter's mouth at 5:30 p.m. sharp, the exact moment Daniel Brooks stood up and began clearing his desk, just as he had every single day for the past 4 years. He didn't dodge it, didn't laugh it off, didn't look uncomfortable. He simply stopped, hand resting on the door handle, his gaze dropping in a way that made her heart constrict unexpectedly. She didn't know that the answer coming would shatter everything she believed about ambition, about love, and about the promises people make when no one's watching anymore. Evelyn Carter became CFO at 32, the youngest in the company's 70-year history. The boardroom had questioned whether she earned it or inherited it. Her father had been a major shareholder before his death. Every decision she made was scrutinized twice as hard. Every success attributed to luck or nepotism rather than skill. So she worked harder, stayed later, demanded more. She built her reputation on uncompromising standards and expected everyone around her to share her hunger. To her, dedication wasn't just arriving early or working weekends, it was a mindset, a complete surrender to excellence, which is why Daniel Brooks frustrated her from day one. He was brilliant at his job. Senior financial analyst, impeccable reports, never missed a deadline. His projections were sharper than those of people 10 years his senior. Clients specifically requested him for complex accounts. His performance reviews were flawless. Yet every day at 5:30 p.m., without fail, he stood up and left. No apologies, no guilt, no staying for just one more thing. While others worked late to impress her or jockeyed for visibility, Daniel simply vanished. Every evening. The office talked about it in whispers. Karen from accounting called him the ghost. Marcus from operations made jokes about him turning into a pumpkin at sunset. The running theory was that he was either incredibly arrogant or profoundly lazy, someone coasting on natural talent without real ambition. Evelyn had promoted 3 people in the past year. Daniel wasn't one of them, despite being objectively the strongest candidate each time. She'd offered him the senior manager position in April. He declined. She'd offered him the director role in September, with a significant raise. He declined. She'd offered him the lead analyst position for their new Singapore branch in January, a career-defining opportunity. He declined again. Each time, his reason was the same. I appreciate it, but I can't take on evening responsibilities. It baffled her, insulted her even. Here she was, handing him the keys to the kingdom, and he was turning them down because he couldn't or wouldn't stay past dinner time. You're wasting your potential, she'd told him after the 3rd rejection, unable to hide her irritation. Daniel had looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Sad, tired, resigned. Not everyone is climbing toward the same thing, Miss Carter. The response had stayed with her, nagging like a splinter she couldn't quite reach. What could possibly be more important than building a career? Than making something of yourself? She decided he lacked drive. Simple as that. It was the only explanation that made sense to someone who'd sacrificed relationships, hobbies, and half her 20s to sit in the chair she now occupied. Daniel Brooks was 36 years old, with the kind of quiet competence that made him nearly invisible in a corporate environment obsessed with self-promotion. He didn't eat lunch in the cafeteria, didn't attend happy hours, didn't participate in office politics or curry favor with management. But his work spoke volumes. He'd caught a $6 million accounting error that 3 auditors had missed. He'd restructured the client portfolio system so efficiently that processing time dropped by 40%. He'd mentored 2 junior analysts who went on to win company-wide recognition. Yet when Evelyn reviewed his file for the 4th time, trying to understand him, she found something odd. Before 4 years ago, his record was aggressive. He'd worked at a top consulting firm, regularly logged 70-hour weeks, traveled internationally, and was on the fast track to partner. Then, abruptly, he'd taken a leave of absence. When he returned to the workforce 6 months later, it was here a mid-tier position at a smaller firm, with a salary well below his previous bracket, and he'd never worked past 5:30 p.m. again. Something had happened. Something significant enough to completely reshape his priorities. Evelyn wanted to dismiss it as burnout or a personal crisis he'd never properly recovered from. But the way he worked, focused, meticulous, present, didn't suggest someone broken or defeated. It suggested someone who'd made a choice she didn't understand. At 5:31 p.m., Daniel Brooks walked through the parking garage to his 7-year-old sedan. It wasn't the car of someone who'd been a rising star at a consulting firm. It was practical, reliable, and paid off. He drove the same route every evening. 15 minutes through moderate traffic, exiting onto Riverside Avenue, turning left at the second light. At 5:52 p.m., he pulled into the parking lot of Street Aurora Long-Term Care Center. The building was newer than most facilities of its kind, with large windows and a garden courtyard. It tried hard not to look like what it was, a place where people went when the future had narrowed to a single, unchanging present. Daniel signed in at the front desk. The receptionist, Claire, knew him by name. "Evening, Daniel. She had a good day today." Very calm. "That's good. Thank you, Claire." He walked down the east corridor, past rooms where elderly residents watched television or sat in wheelchairs, their eyes tracking movement without recognition. Room 217. He knocked softly, even though he knew there would be no answer, and stepped inside. Emily Brooks lay in the adjustable bed, positioned at a slight incline. Her blonde hair, which Daniel had washed and braided that morning before work, was starting to come loose. Her eyes were open but unfocused, gazing toward the window where late afternoon light filtered through sheer curtains. She was 34 years old. She'd been like this for 4 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Daniel set his bag down, pulled the chair closer to her bedside, and reached for her hand. Her fingers were warm, her pulse steady. The machines monitoring her vitals beeped softly in the background. "Hey, Em," he said quietly. He reached into his bag and pulled out the book they were currently reading together, a mystery novel she'd been halfway through when the accident happened. He'd started from the beginning 4 years ago, reading a chapter each evening. They'd finished 63 books so far. "Where were we?" he murmured, flipping to the dog-eared page. "Right. Chapter 12. The detective just found the second clue. He read for 30 minutes, his voice steady and calm, occasionally glancing up to see if there was any change in her expression. There never was. At 6:45 p.m., a nurse came in to check Emily's vitals and adjust her IV. Daniel stepped aside, waiting patiently. "You're very consistent," the nurse, Patricia, said warmly. "A lot of families." "Well, they stop coming as regularly after a while." Daniel didn't respond to that. He simply thanked her and returned to his chair once she left. He pulled out a hairbrush from his bag and gently smoothed Emily's hair, rebraiding it with practiced efficiency. He moisturized her hands, which had grown dry from the climate-controlled air. He adjusted the blanket, small acts of care that no longer had a recipient who could acknowledge them, but he did them anyway. At 7:30 p.m., he leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I'll see you tomorrow, Em." "I love you." He stood, gathered his things, and walked back down the corridor. The same route, the same rhythm, every single day. At 8 p.m., Daniel unlocked the door to his modest 2-bedroom house. The mortgage was manageable, the neighborhood safe, the yard just big enough for a swing set. "Daddy!" Sophie Brooks, 8 years old with her mother's blonde hair and her father's gray eyes, came running from the living room, where Mrs. Henderson, the evening sitter, was packing up her knitting. "Hey, sweetheart." Daniel scooped her up, and she wrapped her arms around his neck with the fierce, uncomplicated love that only children possess. "How's Mommy?" Sophie asked, as she did every evening. "She's good, resting peacefully. Did you read to her?" "I did." Chapter 12. The one with the clue at the harbor. Daniel smiled. Sophie knew the plot of every book he read to Emily because he'd recount the chapters during dinner. It was her way of being part of the visits she couldn't make. The facility didn't allow children in the long-term coma ward, a policy Daniel both understood and resented. That's the one. Mrs. Henderson gathered her coat. She had dinner at 6, finished her homework, and we practiced piano for 20 minutes. She's all yours. Thank you, Linda. Same time tomorrow? I'll be here. After she left, Daniel and Sophie settled into their evening routine. Bath time, pajamas, teeth brushing. Then they sat on her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and drawings taped to the walls. Many of the drawings featured 3 people: a tall man, a small girl, and a woman with yellow hair lying in a bed with flowers around her. Can I send Mommy a new picture tomorrow? Sophie asked. Of course. What are you going to draw? The 3 of us at the beach. Like before. Before. The word hung in the air, heavy with all the weight an 8-year-old shouldn't have to carry. Sophie had been 4 when the accident happened. A drunk driver, a rainy intersection, a split second of catastrophic timing. Daniel had been at work. Emily had been driving home from her book club. The doctors had said she might not make it through the night. Then they said she might not make it through the week. Then they stopped giving timelines altogether. She breathed on her own. Her heart beat steadily, but the traumatic brain injury had been severe, and the chances of her regaining consciousness decreased with every month that passed. After 2 years, a neurologist had gently suggested that Daniel consider other options, that maybe it was time to discuss quality of life, advance directives, letting go. Daniel had walked out of that appointment and never went back to that doctor. Sophie pulled out a worn photograph from her nightstand drawer, the 3 of them at the beach 2 summers before the accident. Emily, laughing, her arms around both of them, the ocean stretching endlessly behind them. Do you think Mommy feels them? Sophie asked quietly, staring at the photo. The kisses you give her? Daniel's throat tightened. This was the question that haunted him in the dark hours of the night, the one he could never answer with certainty. I think she does, he said. Because what else could he say to his daughter? I think she knows we're there. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart? You'd tell me if she was going away, right? Like really away? Sophie. He pulled her close, feeling her small body against his chest. She nodded against him, satisfied for now with the reassurance that might not survive tomorrow's questions. Later, after she'd fallen asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table alone. The 3rd chair, Emily's chair, remained where it had always been. He'd never moved it, never sat in it, never let anyone else use it. It was waiting. Everything was waiting. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. Mandatory attendance. Annual benefactor. Evelyn's assistant had marked it high priority and sent it to all senior staff, including Daniel. He read it twice, then checked his calendar as if hoping the date might somehow be different. It wasn't. At 3 p.m., he knocked on Evelyn's office door. She glanced up from her laptop, surprised. Daniel Brooks didn't initiate meetings. He didn't drop by for casual conversations. He existed in a carefully maintained bubble of professional competence and personal distance. Daniel. Come in. He remained standing, his posture stiff. I need to request an exemption from the gala. Evelyn set down her pen. It's mandatory for all senior analysts. We're hosting major clients. Your presence matters. I understand. But I can't attend evening events. Can't or won't. The question came out sharper than she intended, tinged with 4 years of accumulated frustration. Daniel met her gaze steadily. Can't. Daniel, I've been patient with your schedule limitations, but this is non-negotiable. It's 1 evening, 3 hours, maximum. Surely you can make arrangements. The word was quiet but absolute. Evelyn felt her jaw tighten. This is your career we're talking about. If you want to be taken seriously for future opportunities, I don't. She blinked. Excuse me? I don't want future opportunities. Not if they require evening commitments. That's... She searched for the word. That's absurd. You're 36 years old. You're talented. You could be leading a department by 40, VP by 45, but not if you keep putting artificial limits on your availability. They're not artificial limits, Miss Carter. Then what are they? Daniel was silent for a long moment, and she saw something flicker across his face. Pain, maybe, or exhaustion. They're the limits that matter more than a title. Nothing matters more than building something meaningful with your career. Evelyn shot back. That's where you find purpose, legacy. Security, is it? Daniel asked quietly. Have you? The question hung between them, more intimate and cutting than anything that should be said in a boss's office. Evelyn felt heat rise to her face. Get out, Miss Carter. I said get out. And be at that gala, Brooks. That's not a request. He left without another word. Evelyn sat alone after he'd gone, staring at the closed door. Have you? The audacity of the question infuriated her. Yes. Yes. She had found purpose in her career. She'd built something from nothing, proven herself against impossible odds, created financial stability not just for herself but for hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on the company's success. So why did his question feel like it had landed in a hollow space she'd been carefully ignoring for years? She pulled up Daniel's file again, scrolling through his performance reviews, trying to find the flaw, the weakness that would justify her anger. There was none, just a note from 4 years ago, returning from extended personal leave, requesting modified schedule. What had happened during that leave? For the first time, Evelyn genuinely wanted to know. 3 days before the gala, Evelyn made a decision that surprised even herself. She called an emergency meeting with the event planning committee and announced that the gala would now begin at 4 p.m. instead of 7 p.m., restructured as an afternoon cocktail benefit. Her assistant stared at her. We've already sent out 200 invitations. Send updated ones, make it work. But why? Because I'm the CFO, and I said so. It was a power play disguised as accommodation, and she knew it. She told herself she was doing it to avoid conflict, to keep a valuable employee productive. But as she watched Daniel leave at exactly 4:45 p.m. on the day of the gala, having attended, networked with clients, and performed flawlessly for exactly 45 minutes, she realized something unsettling. She'd rearranged an entire company event for one person, and she still didn't know why he needed it. The following week, Evelyn found herself volunteering at Street Aurora Long-Term Care Center. She told herself it was for the tax write-off, for the company's community outreach initiative. For optics, all lies. She'd looked up care facilities near office on a whim and found Street Aurora. Something about the name felt familiar, like she'd heard it before in passing. The volunteer coordinator had been thrilled to have a CFO's name on their roster and immediately scheduled her for Tuesday evening. Evelyn arrived at 6 p.m., wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual suit, feeling strangely out of place. The coordinator, Helen, gave her a brief orientation. We mostly need help in the common areas, playing cards with residents, reading to those who enjoy it, just providing company. Many of them don't get regular visitors. Evelyn nodded, taking in the quiet hallways, the antiseptic smell barely masked by lavender air fresheners. The pervasive sense of time moving differently here. She was passing through the east corridor when she saw him, Daniel Brooks, sitting in a chair beside a hospital bed, reading aloud from a book. Evelyn froze. The woman in the bed was young, far too young to be in a place like this. Her eyes were open but vacant, her expression peaceful but empty. Daniel's voice was gentle as he read, pausing occasionally to glance at the woman's face as if checking for a response that never came. Evelyn watched, hidden partially by a doorway, unable to move. He finished the chapter, then carefully closed the book. He reached for the woman's hand, holding it between both of his own. I love you, Em, he said softly. I'll see you tomorrow." He kissed her forehead, gathered his things, and stood. Evelyn stepped back, heart pounding, and slipped into a nearby room before he could see her. After his footsteps faded down the hallway, she approached the nurse's station, trying to keep her voice casual. "The man who was just here in room 217. Is he a family member?" The nurse on duty, Patricia, smiled warmly. "Oh, Daniel?" "Yes, that's his wife, Emily. He comes every single day. Has for over 4 years. Rain or shine, he's never missed a day." Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. What happened to her? Car accident. Traumatic brain injury. She's been in a persistent vegetative state ever since. Patricia's expression turned sad. "It's heartbreaking. She's so young, and he's so devoted. Most spouses, well, they don't stay this committed for this long. Why does he keep coming?" The question came out as a whisper. Patricia looked at her, puzzled by the intensity. "Because he loves her. Because those vows mean something to him. In sickness and in health, he takes it literally." Evelyn thanked her mechanically and walked back down the corridor on unsteady legs. She paused outside room 217. Through the small window in the door, she could see Emily Brooks lying peacefully. Flowers on the windowsill, drawings taped to the walls, children's drawings, bright and hopeful. A daughter. He had a daughter too. Everything clicked into place with devastating clarity. The 5:30 departures, the refused promotions, the immovable boundaries. He wasn't uncommitted to his career. He was completely committed to something else. Evelyn left the facility without completing her volunteer shift. She sat in her car in the parking lot as the sky darkened, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She thought about her corner office, her impressive title, her 6-figure salary. She thought about Daniel Brooks reading to a woman who couldn't hear him, brushing hair that wouldn't be felt, pressing kisses that wouldn't be returned. Every single day, for over 4 years, and she'd called him unmotivated. The next morning, Evelyn did something she'd never done before. She asked Daniel to join her for coffee. Off-site. Not a performance review, not a work discussion. Just coffee. He looked wary, but agreed. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. The morning rush over, the space between them filled with everything unspoken. "I was at Street Aurora last night," Evelyn said finally. "Volunteering." Daniel's expression didn't change, but she saw his hand tighten around his mug. "I saw you," she continued. "With your wife?" A long silence. "I didn't know," Evelyn said. "I should have asked. I should have. I'm sorry." Daniel exhaled slowly. "You weren't supposed to know. I don't talk about it at work." "Why not?" "Because people don't know what to do with it. They either pity you or think you're crazy. Neither is helpful." Evelyn nodded slowly. "How long has she been?" 4 years, 2 months, 3 weeks. He said it automatically, like someone who counted days. "Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. She was gone before I got to the hospital, not dead, but gone. The Emily I knew. She left that night. I'm so sorry. Everyone is." His voice wasn't bitter, just tired. "The doctors are sorry. The insurance company is sorry. Our families are sorry. They're all very, very sorry. But they want you to move on." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Her parents asked me to sign a DNR after 6 months. My brother offered to help me start fresh after a year. My old boss told me I was throwing my life away when I took this job. Everyone has an opinion on what I should do. And what do you think you should do?" He looked at her directly, and the grief in his eyes was old and deep. "I think I made a promise. In front of 100 people, in a church, with rings and witnesses and God or the universe or whatever you believe in watching. I promised in sickness and in health, till death do us part." "She's not." Evelyn hesitated. "She's not going to get better." "Is she?" "No. The doctors have been very clear about that." Then what? Then I should consider her dead? Move on? Find someone else?" Daniel's voice remained calm, but something sharp entered it. That's what people suggest. They don't say it outright, but that's what they mean. They say I'm young, that I deserve happiness, that Emily would want me to live my life. Would she? Probably. She was generous like that. But that's not the point. He set his mug down carefully. The point is that she's not dead. Her heart beats, she breathes, and I promise to be there in sickness. This is sickness. This is exactly what that vow means. What about your daughter? Something shifted in his face. Sophie is 8. She was 4 when it happened. She barely remembers Emily as she was. But she knows her mother is alive, and she knows I visit every day. What would I be teaching her if I gave up? That promises have expiration dates? That love is conditional? Evelyn felt something crack open inside her chest. I'm not a saint, Daniel continued quietly. I'm not doing this to be noble or make a point. I'm doing it because I look at Emily lying there, and I still see my wife. I still remember dancing with her at our wedding. I remember the way she laughed when Sophie took her first steps. I remember 1,000 tiny moments that made up a life together. And you've never thought about dating? Daniel finished. No. The ceremony didn't have a clause that said, unless she can't talk back. The words hung between them, weighted with a kind of devotion Evelyn had never encountered. She thought of the men she'd dated casually over the years. Relationships that ended over minor inconveniences. Someone who didn't text back fast enough, who got too busy with work, who wanted different things. Nothing tested, nothing proven, nothing that required sacrifice. How do you do it? She asked. Every single day, knowing it won't change? Daniel was quiet for a moment. I don't think about the days. I think about the hours. Right now, I'm having coffee. Later, I'll be at work. Then, I'll be with Emily. Then, I'll be with Sophie. I just keep showing up for the people I love. That's all I know how to do. Evelyn felt tears threaten and pushed them back. I called you unmotivated. I know. I thought you were wasting your potential. I know that too. I'm sorry. Daniel met her eyes. Miss Carter, you don't need to apologize for having different priorities. Most people would agree with you. A career, ambition, building something, those are valuable. They just aren't. They aren't what I have room for right now. What if I made accommodations? Real ones. No evening obligations, protected boundaries, complete scheduling flexibility. I appreciate it, Daniel interrupted gently. But I'm not looking to climb higher. I'm exactly where I need to be. Evelyn didn't tell anyone about the conversation. But things changed anyway. She stopped scheduling mandatory evening events. When questions arose, she simply said the afternoon format generated better attendance and moved on. She quietly reworked Daniel's responsibilities to eliminate any hint of after-hours pressure. When the executive team questioned why a senior analyst wasn't taking on more leadership, she deflected with performance metrics that spoke for themselves. She made an anonymous donation to Street Aurora Long-Term Care Center, enough to upgrade their equipment and extend their visiting hours. She started leaving the office at 6:30 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. Not every night, but some nights. She went to a pottery class. She called her sister more often. She read books that had nothing to do with finance. Small acts that felt revolutionary. Her assistant noticed. Are you feeling okay? You've seemed different lately. I'm fine, Evelyn said, and realized it was true. She was fine. Maybe for the first time in years, she watched Daniel leave at 5:30 p.m. each day with new understanding. He wasn't running from anything. He was running toward something, and for the first time, she wondered what she was running toward herself. 6 weeks after their coffee conversation, Evelyn received a brief email from Daniel. Small development, taking personal day. No details, no explanation. But the next morning, when he returned, there was something different in his expression. Not happiness, exactly. More like a crack in the clouds. Evelyn waited until afternoon, then approached his desk. Is everything okay? Daniel looked up, and for the first time since she'd known him, he smiled. Small, tentative, but genuine. Emily squeezed my hand last night. The doctor thinks it might have been voluntary. Evelyn's breath caught. That's huge. Maybe. It might be nothing. Reflex movements happen. But they're running tests. It's the first change in 4 years. Daniel, that's incredible. I'm trying not to hope too much. But even as he said it, the hope was visible, fragile, and terrifying. What did Sophie say? She cried. Happy tears. She wants to make a welcome back banner. He laughed softly. I had to explain that Mommy might not be back all the way, that this might be as far as it goes, but she insists it's a miracle. Maybe it is. Daniel shook his head slightly. I don't believe in miracles. I believe in showing up, in being there, in holding on. He paused. But if she comes back, even a little, if she can communicate, can be part of Sophie's life in any real way. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. That evening, Evelyn found herself driving past Street Aurora. She didn't go in. She just sat in the parking lot as 5:52 p.m. approached and watched Daniel's car pull in. Right on time, like always. A few minutes later, she saw him walking toward the entrance, and she noticed something she'd never seen before. He was almost running. 3 months later, Emily Brooks regained consciousness. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Enough to recognize Daniel. Enough to speak a few words. Enough to smile when Sophie came to visit under special permission. The neurologists were astounded. Cases like this were rare. And when they happened, the level of recovery she'd achieved was nearly unprecedented. Daniel took an extended leave to be there during her rehabilitation. The company approved it immediately, with Evelyn's signature. When he returned 6 weeks later, Emily had been transferred to a different facility, one focused on rehabilitation rather than maintenance. The prognosis was uncertain. She would need years of therapy. Some cognitive functions might never fully return. The future was a vast question mark, but she was awake. She was there. How is she? Evelyn asked during a brief check-in meeting. Frustrated, exhausted, scared. Daniel smiled slightly. But she's trying. She asks about Sophie constantly. She wants to remember everything she missed. And you? I'm grateful. He said it simply. I got more time than I thought I would. 4 years of one-sided conversations suddenly have answers. She doesn't remember most of what I told her, but she's here to make new memories. What happens now? Now we relearn each other. It won't be the same as before. She's changed. I've changed, but we have a chance to build something from here. Evelyn nodded, feeling emotion swell in her throat. You never gave up on her. No, Daniel agreed, but that's not special. That's just what love looks like when everything else is stripped away. 2 years later, Evelyn Carter attended a small backyard barbecue. It wasn't a corporate event. It wasn't networking. It was an invitation from Daniel and Emily Brooks to celebrate Sophie's 10th birthday. Emily moved slowly, her speech still slightly labored, but she was present. She laughed at Sophie's jokes. She helped Daniel flip burgers. She thanked Evelyn 3 times for the gift she'd brought. He told me what you did, Emily said quietly when they had a moment alone, changing the schedules, protecting his boundaries, supporting him. I didn't do anything special. You let him keep a promise most people would have released him from. That's not nothing. Evelyn watched Daniel and Sophie throwing a frisbee, their laughter carrying across the yard. He taught me something important, Evelyn said, about what matters. And what's that? Evelyn thought about her corner office, her title, her achievements. Then she thought about this, a backyard birthday party, a family slowly rebuilding, a promise kept against impossible odds. That some things are worth staying for, she said finally, even when everyone tells you to leave. Emily smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. Later, as the sun set and candles were lit on Sophie's cake, Evelyn stood slightly apart, watching the scene. Daniel caught her eye and nodded, a gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude. She nodded back. Some promises didn't have expiration dates, and some people loved without needing anything in return. Not everyone was climbing toward the same thing, and maybe, just maybe, that was exactly as it should be.